Welcome to Perspectives with Wenchi Yu, where we discuss Trump 2.0's policies and politics and their implications for Asia, China, Taiwan, and beyond. The growing demand for AI and Taiwan's manufacturing strength have contributed to a significant U.S. trade deficit with Taiwan. According to recent data, the trade deficit for the first 7 months of 2025 already reached $70 billion. As the seventh largest trading partner to the United States, the increasing trade imbalance has already created tariff uncertainty for Taiwan. A 20% provisional tariff is in place on some Taiwanese exports to the U.S., but major companies like TSMC and Foxconn might not be affected by the 100% semiconductor tariff because they are already investing in the U.S., although no further details have been announced. Even though the US-Taiwan trade relationship is experiencing unprecedented closeness, evidenced by the growing number of US states with trade offices in Taiwan, Trump's tariff uncertainty has also had a direct impact on Taiwan's ruling party, the DPP, which is perceived to have closer ties with the US. According to my conversation with the president of American Chamber of Commerce in Taiwan, Carl Wegner, in addition to tariffs as the top concern for American businesses in Taiwan, energy stability and Taiwan's vibrant yet sometimes unpredictable democracy are also on top of the mind. Let's hear Carl's perspective. All right, welcome, Carl. It's so nice to have you today, the president of AmCham Taiwan. Tell us how you got to this position. It's a relatively new thing for you, right?
Yeah, Wenchi, well, thanks for having me, and it's great to be here. How did I get here? I guess it's a long story, so I probably first...
And you lived in Taiwan before. It's not your first time.
No, this is not my first time. So I first came to Taiwan in '83, '84 as a exchange student from university from Georgetown. And at that time, Taiwan still martial law. But again, at that time, it was a lot, it was there for folks to learn Chinese and interact with people here under martial law than it was in China. So the decision from my instructors was, come to Taiwan, that's the place to come. So that was my first exposure to Taiwan, '83, '84. I moved back to Taiwan in '88 to, again, be able to use Chinese. And since '88, I've been in Asia ever since. So about...
You've been in different parts of Asia? What countries have you been?
Mostly North Asia. So, I mean, I've been about 25 years in Taiwan, about 15 years in China, Shanghai 3 times, Beijing once, Hong Kong once, but always coming back to Taiwan. And in that, I've done about 25 years of banking. So I was at Bank of Boston, set up offices in China in the 80s, the late 80s, and then went to Standard Chartered Bank and Deutsche Bank, and then left banking in 2000 for a .com to on trade finance, and did that for 7 years. Went back to banking and then left again banking for the last time to learn the crypto blockchain world and help set up an Asia franchise for a level 1 blockchain, and then that led me to commercialize a POC in 2019, 2020. That put me 4 years in Singapore for the first time in Southeast Asia, and then when we sold that in early 2024, was doing some stuff there, and then the opportunity to come to AmCham came up, and I'd been a board member of AmCham about 15 years ago, so I sort of knew the structure a bit, but obviously very different than being the president. But I thought it was a great opportunity to come back, contribute, and come back to Taiwan, which is my home. I've spent more time here than I have in the U.S.
I have to say an interesting transition as well from blockchain to AmCham, and you probably don't usually associate these two together, but help us understand what is AmCham Taiwan's mission.
Yeah, no, so AmCham Taiwan is it's the largest foreign chamber in Taiwan. We have some 500 members. Slight majority is American, but we also have Europeans, Japanese, Taiwanese companies as well. There's 24 committees, each is done by industry, and those committees, they have challenges, issues with regulations or policy. We work with them to bring those to the Taiwan government and discuss them, see how we can bring them, update them and help the industry. And all those issues go into a white paper once a year, and that white paper gets presented to the the Taiwan government, all the ministries, and then we take that white paper and answer from the Taiwan government and ministries, and then do a door knock in D.C. once a year. And I guess that's where I met you, but we did the door knock a few months ago.
Yeah, when you came to Washington D.C.
So it's really advocacy is our main goal. One has always been a little bit of challenge because being the unique position they're in terms of diplomatic relations, etc. So advocacy is a big piece of what we do.
Since you already brought up regulations and policies, we want to talk about, the current challenges facing American companies in Taiwan. It's probably not an exaggeration to say I don't think companies ever faced this kind of uncertainty before. And this is not just Taiwan. This is literally worldwide. And so could we just start with tariffs, since that is at the center of almost everything?
No, yes and no, right? The first point you made is really important, is that this is not just Taiwan, right? Mm-hmm. It's the whole world. The whole world is dealing with a new dynamic in terms of tariffs from the U.S., right? And so everyone is managing it slightly differently, but it's a challenge for everyone, right? And it's always those things that, well, what about Taiwan? What about the rest of the world? But in Taiwan specifically, at the moment, and it's been changing, when I was in the door knock in June, the decision was supposed to be made then, and then it got postponed. At the moment, it's a 20% provisional tariff, and that.
Yeah. History, because it was first at 32% in April when
it was the 32% again, but then waiting for more discussions. Taiwan and the Taiwan negotiators been working closely with the U.S. We actually, in our door knock, we met some of the trade negotiation on the U.S. side, and they normally do, I don't know how many of these a year, but they had to do 50 countries in 90 days. Right, and they were just haggard. They were working hard to try to make this happen.
Did you guys meet with Ambassador Greer?
We didn't, but we did speak with the USTR and others in D.C. So again, it was 32%. It's now been announced as a 20% provisional, which means Taiwan is still continuing to have the discussions to bring it down more. So it's ongoing negotiations, and nothing has been papered yet. Most of these, even where it's settled, the amount what's actually been signed off on both sides is pretty limited. It's mostly discussion points, which means it's open to negotiation.
How do people do business in this kind of circumstance?
It's difficult. The thing what businesses want the most is certainty, right? Yeah. So they can do planning. Looking at the 20% tariff, it's really only affecting about 25% of Taiwan's exports to the U.S., so it's not a majority. That's from our calculations.
Explain that a little bit. Why is it only 25% of the others?
Well, because the biggest export from Taiwan is semiconductors. As of last week, President Trump announced a 100% chip tariff. But again, that's for companies not investing in the U.S. So the biggest companies in Taiwan, TSMC, Quanta, MediaTek, Foxconn, they're already investing. So it's not affecting them.
Yeah, but is it clear yet? I know people seem to be relieved that the semiconductor tariffs, even though it's at 100%, but likely not affecting those companies that you mentioned. But it was just Trump saying there was no details, and it wasn't entirely certain whether it was just any company that invests in the U.S., that covers all chips, or is it just the chips that were manufactured in the U.S.? Like, was there any detail or discussion or any?
This is like everything else that's been going on for the past 3 to 6 months. There's not that level of detail. You're absolutely right. There was a sigh of relief on Taiwan. The stock market actually went up on the 7th. But yeah, the details are still to be worked out. People are going ahead based on those assumptions. The challenge for Taiwan is really going to be in the SME industry.
Exactly.
Right. If they're in the supply chain for semiconductors, they may not be able to set up something in the U.S., so that's a challenge. We'll talk about that investment a little bit more in a moment. But even other industries, right? Machine screws and, high-end things. It's much smaller than semiconductors, but high-end quality machine screws. There's some very detailed things that are made OEM'd here in Taiwan that are going to be affected, and that's going to be a challenge. And I think the government's talked about some plans to support them through this challenging period.
Let's first talk about the SMEs that you mentioned 25% of the export. What, in addition to the metals, that some of the things you talk about, anything else? So that's the first part. And the second part, I want to talk about how is that affecting American investment in Taiwan or not at all?
Last question first. American investment in Taiwan still continues. We had AWS announced a $5 billion investment in a data center here. Obviously the environment here for American companies to invest is still quite positive. We had a survey toward the end of last year, so early 2025, and over 70% of our members said that they were going to continue to equal or increase their investment.
But that was pre-tariffs policy, right?
Right,
and so you get a sense that that continues to be the same, or that might
I think
not
it continues to be the same. When there's more certainty, then it's time to, and people can actually analyze specifically, then we'll maybe do another survey. But I think the key thing, Taiwan, the Taiwan-U.S. relationship is amazing in terms of cooperation. This was one of the big takeaways when we went to D.C., was to talk about that, and we can talk about that visit a little bit later. But that cooperation, that mindset is very similar. So I think the investment environment still stays strong. I think the challenge for some of the SMEs into the U.S. is it's not even related to tariffs. Now, tariffs may push them a little bit sooner, but something we've been talking about for a long time is dual tax treaty between Taiwan and the U.S., and it's been around for...
That's been in the works, right? They were trying to address
for over 10 years. Over 10 years. And so people see it's making more progress. There's some challenges. Will it get through? Will it get sent? Time on the Senate floor before the end of the year may be the challenge. But the bipartisan...
is the double taxation issue.
Double taxation, the top 10 trading partners in the U.S. have a double taxation treaty already in place, which means if you get taxed in one country, you don't get taxed in both. Now, someone...
businesses.
Yeah, so for investments. If you have someone like a TSMC, they can absorb it, but smaller SMEs can't. And the conversation that we had when we were in D.C. was, again, talking to some of these states that want... this investment. They're all looking everyone wants what Arizona got, $165 billion. But, it's the smaller SMEs, they can't take the hit of that dual taxation. And there's also a pledge that's required. Without that, it would be easier for them to invest. And so this is something we've been pushing for a long time.
Yeah, so essentially, the higher tariffs originally was to incentivize those companies to invest in the U.S. But in the case of Taiwan, because of double taxation, it's making it very challenging.
Folks that wanted to go may have held back. The tariffs may push them forward, and this is why we're hoping that dual taxation treaty can be put into effect, and that would open up the door for a lot more investment in the U.S. I think Taiwan, a lot of the supply chain for the semiconductor would like to move. There's literally hundreds of smaller companies that are part of this ecosystem.
Can they be counted as part of the semiconductor industry rather than strictly just those big companies?
No, so the SMEs would be the same thing. If they invested in the U.S. and again, it's not detailed how much, whatever, but that would get them free of the 100%.
So obviously, tariffs is the elephant in the room, but we also want to touch on other industries and other issues, and energy is a very crucial one for the business community. What is the controversy there?
There's a referendum coming up August 23rd for the AmCham nuclear plant, which was shut down. The folks who are against opening up are worried about safety, security, aging facilities, high costs, and the unresolved waste storage issues. And those are the folks who are against it. The folks for it makes sense to have more stable power during energy transition, energy security, with geopolitical tensions. The majority of Taiwan's energy is imported through LNG, and so that's a a geopolitical challenge potentially as well in the future.
Right now, for those who don't know that much about Taiwan's energy challenge, for example, in the summer, I know it's always an issue because the electricity demand is so much higher. Before we came online, you were just talking about how hot Taiwan is.
I bet it's getting hot.
Yeah, and now that with so much more investment in semiconductors as well as AI related, it just sounds like the energy demand is only going to grow much faster. And so why did the government shut down the last nuclear power plant?
The biggest concern being Fukushima. That sort of triggered the more concern about nuclear power plants. Now, they're looking at how to build waste storage facilities, how to make it safer. It's something that everyone's looking at from a AmCham point of view. It's just reliability, which is what our members
Is it a real issue yet? For example, has power supply been unstable?
The current administration has said that they commit that for everything that's being built now, is existing now, being built in the future, there will be enough energy until I think 2030 at least, that there'll be enough energy to cover everything that's planned. So we're not at a point yet at this moment where we're running out. We're not doing rolling brownouts or anything like that.
There was certainly some concern about, in the case of blockade, as you mentioned, geopolitical tensions, it may actually become an issue. And you said that Taiwan is currently very dependent on LNG, mostly purchased from the U.S., right?
There's other areas as well. There was discussion with the governor of Alaska of increasing the purchase from the U.S. considerably, and that is an MOU that's already been signed and discussions going on to increase that purchasing from the U.S. Yeah.
And is that part of the trade deal as well? There was some.
It should be, right? But it's hard to say. This tariff deal has changed from a sort of a tariff deal to almost a bilateral trade agreement with everything that's including. And so again, it's a different dynamic on how this is negotiated. But yes, Taiwan looking at that MOU it's hoping that's also showing more commitment to purchase from the U.S. as well.
Since you mentioned it's almost becoming like a bilateral trade agreement, what about the biggest purchase, which is defense?
Defense is still super important. When we went on our door knock, we talked a lot about the backlog, because there's a lot of backlog stuff that's been ordered that hasn't been delivered yet. No one's fault in a way. It's the process. It's a negotiation and then the manufacturing process, which has slowed the delivery down. So defense is still a big thing. One thing that's been talked about is potentially co-production in Taiwan, which is really interesting because it's a discussion both on the Taiwan and the U.S. side on, what could be built in Taiwan that would, not only help Taiwan in terms of resilience, but also leverage what Taiwan knows how to build things. If you say Israel, a startup country, Taiwan's a scale-up country, right? A lot of stuff is designed in the U.S., and then they come to Taiwan. How do we scale it? How do we build it? How do we manufacture it? Some of the things that be co-production could be drones, UAVs, submarine drones. We're discovering is one of the biggest challenges. It's a commercial challenge because if someone came here to manufacture and leverage Taiwan's ability to scale and build it efficiently, fantastic. But the market in Taiwan is not big enough for someone to build a factory and scale. You have to obviously sell to other countries.
Everything,
items.
right? I mean, even chips is the same way. You don't build these things to sell to Taiwan. You build these things in Taiwan to sell to the world. Yeah. So.
But Taiwan did that by themselves, right? Exactly. There's
True. And now everyone is saying that's an issue. The only thing is just, like you said, the drones. Do they actually have that huge market?
Obviously, there's a lot of talk about drones and the potential here. It's looking at what's happened in Ukraine. The drones are a bigger part of military procurement in the future. We talk about investment in Taiwan, or Taiwan investment in the U.S. When I first saw it, there was about 6-7 state offices in Taiwan. I think there are 24 now. It's expanded that more states, want to see that connection, see those opportunities.
What is really prompting that? We know, of course, US-Taiwan relationship has gotten closer in recent years, partially also because US-China relationship hasn't been going that well. But in terms of real business opportunity, other than semiconductors, what are the other things you're seeing that draw US and Taiwan business closer?
It's a good question. Taiwan has IT, cybersecurity strengths. There's other things that some of these states see opportunities, whether their state offices, obviously, they're hoping for Taiwan to invest into their state, into the bigger U.S. market and produce there or maybe buy companies there. It's a back and forth. For the state offices, they're just seeing the opportunity and no one asks, no one gets.
I think it becomes a much more intentional effort to look into the opportunities. That's quite interesting. Do you think it has anything to do with cross-strait relationship as well? And how is that factored into how American companies looking at Taiwan as an opportunity? I still remember when Nancy Pelosi visited Taiwan, and all of a sudden a lot of people were kind of looking at Taiwan as a risk factor. But it sounds like, according to your survey, according to just how many states are setting up offices here, it doesn't seem to be an issue at all.
That was one of the topics of our door knock, was to talk about continuous high-level visits. Because one of the challenges of visits is if you don't do it for a while, then you do it, it causes more concern. But those type of high-level visits,
you want to.
It should be happening all the time. If you continue to do that, then it's not a big thing. You don't get, what happened with Pelosi having sort of a big hubbub about it. What's really good is people acknowledging, now that chips being built here, it's brought Taiwan into a different light. The last 5 years with chips and I think people paying more attention to the cross-straits issues. That's why more states are coming here, and there's more understanding of Taiwan, which is just a good thing.
And so, is it the right way to characterize it and say the U.S.-China tension has benefited Taiwan? Also, the cross-strait relationship hasn't been that great as well. And has that benefited Taiwan's business community as well, or American investment in Taiwan, or that's not a factor?
The first one you said, yes, the attitude of China changing has given more opportunities for Taiwan, absolutely. The cross-straits issue just brought Taiwan in the news up more. It's probably by industry, whether specifically that's been good for one industry or another. But it really depends on the industry. But I think just the identification of Taiwan, understanding of Taiwan has increased considerably. And having TSMC make that a big investment, all that investment in Taiwan into the U.S. is fantastic. It brings the two countries closer. It does potentially mean that, a smaller percentage of U.S.-bound ships will be made in Taiwan, obviously because they're trying to make them in the U.S. But, the percentage is so high right now that it's still going to be a majority. Again, Taiwan makes chips for the whole world.
Well, let's talk about a few other industries that may look promising in Taiwan. What would you say those industries are?
One is the clean energy supply chain, which we talk about a bit. Taiwan excels in wind and solar components, EV parts, engineering, right?
EV parts,
that's a potential to work with the U.S. more closely, work with the U.S. renewable energy build out, as that potential. Talk about biotech and medtech. Taiwan is not a huge population to do testing on, but in terms of fertility treatments, diagnosis, and digital health, the scope for licensing, clinical partnerships with Taiwan, and it goes to the trust in the data. If you think about how TSMC grew, how Taiwan has grown, it goes back to a lot of the trust. That TSMC was built on the trust that this OEM, ODM, I will take all your designs and I won't share them with your competitors. Right? That started with footwear when Nike and Adidas and Under Armour and all these guys were buying from these same factories and knew that they kept them separate and they kept the design separate, right? So that trust has always been there. So I think that trust and, whatever industry it is, that level of trust in Taiwan and IP and is very valuable, and I think Taiwan sort of tries harder there.
So essentially, Taiwan's society as a whole does recognize and respect business ethics. Relatively speaking, and IP is less of an issue, even though it used to be decades ago. So the ease of doing business, as you said, the trust is there. I can see that being helpful to a lot of high-tech related biotech, medtech, because it's very data-driven.
I mean, you could see
again,
cybersecurity, digital services, the IT area. Taiwan understands the Asian regulatory, but also the U.S. regulatory framework. And whether that's data protection, privacy focused, the industrial IoT, Taiwan understands how the U.S. looks at it and follows those regulations. They're not creating their own regulations. They're more following the ones that, the U.S. has implemented. So it makes it easier to work together.
We've talked about some of the risk factors for businesses in Taiwan. Other than geopolitical related, what's on people's mind? What is the biggest concern?
Taiwan is a very interesting society. It's an aging society. This is a big concern. I just saw in the newspaper today that the population has gone down for another year in a row. The population is reducing. The aging population is very high.
Right. Very low birth rate.
Low birth rate, aging population. We're a little bit behind in terms of the progress, because Japan's ahead of us in that way. A bigger aging population and a bigger population. So hopefully Taiwan can learn something from how they're managing it. And that also affects healthcare. The healthcare in Taiwan, the national health system, is run very well. It's incredible now. How do you maintain that when you have a bigger aging population? That's going to be a challenge.
How much do you think the political division is a factor?
Political division and political discussion is part of a vibrant democracy. And that's going to be, in any democracy, you're going to have multiple parties. They're not always going to agree.
That's very healthy. But if it's gridlock, if it's obstructing policies, budget, and business opportunities, then that becomes an issue, right? So going back to your survey, is that an issue, concern, or not yet?
The top is still energy stability. And of course, tariffs came in and made everything
secondary.
Yeah, exactly. That's been actually the top concern.
You advocate on behalf of the American business community in front of the Taiwanese government, but how much do you also advocate back in D.C. with the U.S. government?
No, that's a big piece of what we do. When we talk to the U.S., we really talked about the tax treaty is one thing that helps connect a little bit more. We talked about visits. We talked about the visits. We talked a lot about the similarities in Taiwan and in the U.S. in both being democracies. The mindset is very similar. Taiwan should be seen as a collaborative partner, not a competitor. Just because Taiwan is ODMing does not mean they're a competitor. It just means that they've built scale to help. And again, it goes to designed in the U.S., scaled up in Taiwan, right? Yeah. Why not leverage that a little bit more? The bipartisan appreciation for Taiwan, support of Taiwan, was really surprised me. It's my first door knock. Really surprised me how much, and not just the Taiwan caucus, other senators, representatives that are not necessarily part of that Taiwan caucus, but the understanding of Taiwan is quite high, probably more now than it was years ago.
Yeah, that for sure. The level of awareness and just attention paid to Taiwan has increased, I don't know how many fold, in Washington, D.C. I wanted to, ask before we close, after, a couple years in other parts of Asia and this time coming back to Taiwan, what excites you the most and what worries you the most?
No, Taiwan is home for me, right? This is where I've spent almost all my business career. Taiwan it's a wonderful place to live. It's sort of a hidden gem in terms of, safety and great health services. People are very friendly. A great environment. You have the mountains here. I do a lot of cycling, so I love cycling in the mountains. Here cross-strait relations, are a challenge. Taiwan is stepping up more and more to manage them and building resilience.
What worries you the most?
Not any big worries, really. the challenges Taiwan has is with any democracy. Things keep changing. I think the biggest challenges are what the U.S. is doing are probably the biggest challenges for the whole world.
So that worries you, yeah. It's
yeah.
very interesting. The world has flipped in some way. It used to be Washington is worried about other places making trouble, but now Washington D.C. seems to be one of the bigger risk factors.
It's a paradigm shift. Globally, people are having to learn to manage it. In Asia, with close ties to the U.S., are also having to understand this new relationship.
Well, last question. What do you think is the most misunderstood thing about Taiwan for the international community?
That's a great question. Misunderstood. I think that even though people know Taiwan makes chips and stuff, who don't have enough background to understand how much progress this place has made the last 20, 30 years in terms of democracy. Taiwan had the reign of martial law, 38 years, the second longest. But yet here we are in a democracy.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't understand how much that's such an important thing for Taiwanese to hold on to their democratic system. And therefore, that's a major factor in those political conversations when it comes to cross-strait relations. Well, thank you so much for having this conversation. Hopefully, that's another perspective that's helping the world understand what we're trying to do. I know there's a lot more information out of Taiwan now, but never enough accurate and in-depth information that's very much needed. So thank you for being the bridge between US and Taiwan and helping the world understand Taiwan better. And I'm very, very envious that you get to live in Taiwan.
Yeah.
On August 23rd, Taiwan will hold the second round of a two-part recall election. Following the failure of the first round to recall any of the targeted officials, it is widely expected that the second round will also be unsuccessful. However, a separate referendum on whether to relaunch a recently shut down nuclear power plant is attracting significant attention, as the business community expresses growing concerns about Taiwan's energy reliability, especially when facing geopolitical uncertainty. We will have a deeper dive into Taiwan's urgent energy security in the near future. This is Perspectives with Wenchi Yu, where we analyze the policies and political strategies of Trump 2.0 and their implications for Asia, China, Taiwan, and beyond. Thank you for watching and listening. We value your feedback. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel and podcast. See you next time.